Thomas Green here with Ethical Marketing Service. On the episode today, we have Scott Allan. Scott, welcome.
It's great to be here. Thanks for having me on the show.
It is very much my pleasure. Would you like to take a moment and tell the audience a bit about yourself and what you do?
Absolutely. Yes. My name is Scott Allan. I'm an author, entrepreneur, and I think a visionary. So I love to visualize something that I really want and then build a plan to go and get it. We'll talk more about that later, I think, but I've been living in Japan for about 26 years. And how I got here is another story. But yeah, it's just I love living here, love traveling. Most of my hobbies probably center around my work, which is can be a bit of an obsession. But yes, I back to the publishing though. I've published about 35 to 40 titles, I think. For the most part, they are based on self-help, personal development. And to narrow that down a little bit, the books are, and the content is focused on how to help people build a great life. And if they want to, they can leave the old life behind and build something greater moving forward into the future.
Thank you for the introduction. You are my ideal guest because this is exactly the type of topic that I love to speak about. I had a couple of follow-ups, one
Mm,
being the visualization that you were referring to. I
mm.
think there's a lot of confusion around this topic, and for someone that does it frequently, would you be able to share what your approach is and also why you do it?
Absolutely. Okay. So I'm going to go back a few years before I came to Japan. I'm just going to start with that because I think that'll provide a good framework for how I got here and how I built and continue to build what I'm working on. So probably going back to when I was living in Canada, I was in Vancouver. My background was an electrical engineer, so I was working at the time in that profession. And I just decided, well, I didn't just decide. I was going through a transition period where I was like, I wanted to change the way, not just the way I was living. I wanted to change everything, and I wanted to live a life that I think nobody had ever lived before, like nobody that I knew anyway. Right. So I thought, okay, I'm going to make a list of my goals. So I sat down, made my goals, listed those out, started journaling, and there were a few things that came to mind. The first one was I wanted to be an author, and that's been something since I was probably 10 years old. So that hadn't changed. The second thing is I wanted to travel the world, and that just came out of nowhere. It was never really an ambition of mine, but somehow the seed had been planted there that traveling around the world would be something really neat to do. So I thought, I'm going to do that. And the third thing was I just wanted to become better as a human being. Not that I was a bad human being. I just wanted to become greater at living my life the way that I wanted to. So anyway, what I did in order to make this dream happen is I picked up a book by Tony Robbins. You may have heard of it, Awaken the Giant Within. And Tony said, if you really want to live the life of your dreams, you have to build it. And he recommended to build a vision board. And I thought, okay, well, I haven't done this before. Let's give it a shot. So within a week or two, I had my apartment at the time, this small little apartment I was living in. I had every wall covered with pictures of places I wanted to go, things I wanted to do, positivity quotes, you name it. I just surrounded myself with everything that I wanted to be striving for. And that became like my beacon. Like every day, every day I woke up, I looked at this vision board and I could see, okay, I had pictures of Thailand and Vietnam, and I wasn't planning on coming to Japan at the time, but I just built out this is like this portfolio on my wall of all these places I wanted to visit. And I made a decision. And this is actually the second part of it is like, okay, I've got a vision, but nothing is going to happen unless I actually decide that I'm going to make it happen. And I decided that a year from now, I was going to be doing this thing. And I just stuck with it, and I've done it before. So I knew that it could be done again. And for that year, I just worked on my plan. I remember I had some roommates at the time. We were living in this house, and a couple of them they came home one night, and I'm on the living room floor, and I've got all these books out from like all these exotic places, and they're like, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, "Well, I'll be going here, in like 6 months from now." And they're like, "Oh, okay, well that's interesting," but I was determined. So getting back to the visualization is that I had to build that dream before it actually happened, right? And I think Joe Dispenza talks a lot about this, and a lot of the motivational speakers, they refer to, if you want to really build something, you have to visualize what it is. You have to have a plan for it. And then, from there, you just have to get up every day and work towards that plan, which is what I did. I just kept at it, I think. And you can call it resilience, persistence, but I was just determined to, live this life. I didn't want to become like I don't know, like a nomad, just traveling around doing nothing. I wasn't really sure what the plan was, to be honest. I just wanted to visit these cool places. But anyway, what happened is that a few months into this, if you believe in coincidence, one day my roommate brought home a newspaper, and I don't read the newspaper. I've never read a newspaper in my life except to check what was playing at the movies. And I just opened it up one day, boom, just the middle of the page, the paper. And right there was an advertisement that said, "Teach English in Japan." And I thought, oh, that's a great idea. Why not? So I sent off a resume. A month later, I found myself in downtown Vancouver having a business lunch with a Japanese businessman who had come from Japan to interview people for this, this position in Japan. And yeah, they hired me. So a few months later, I was on a plane and I arrived here. And so getting back to the point of the visualization is that I started living this dream that I had visualized. In fact, it was even greater than I had imagined, but it all started with, deciding what it is that I wanted, make a decision that I was going to get it, and then just, creating a plan as I went. And it wasn't like a solid plan. I didn't have everything laid out for me to see, but I found that in most cases, you just need to know what the next step is. And eventually, if you believe in synchronicity or intuition, these things that people that I would meet, circumstances would just pop up, like like teaching English in Japan, and then next thing it was something else, and everything just kept driving me towards this goal that I had. So I've done this several times though, and I won't get into the other part of it, but that probably tailors into how I started writing the books as well. I more or less did the same thing with that too. So, but anyway, I agree. Like visualization kind of has a, I don't know if it's a stigma, but a lot of people say, well, I don't really believe in it and it doesn't work. But I don't know what to say if you can believe or not believe. But all I can say is like every time I put it into practice, I ended up creating something that not only did I get what I was creating, like I got everything that I wanted. It was even greater than that, So, and a lot of it was like, yeah, believing in it, but you also have to work hard at it, right? So, um, and just be very determined, like this. Like I just, my approach to this is, I'm willing to do whatever it takes to get to the place that I want to get to. And who knows, there's a lot of obstacles in the way, but I've never met an obstacle that I couldn't either. I had to leap over it, work around it. Somehow I was going to get over that. So
Well, thank you for that. I don't know whether your take is the same, but my interpretation of that is like when you visualize and you do it often enough and emotionally enough, the subconscious doesn't know the difference between something that's real and not real. And then when you believe it, when you put that message to your subconscious enough, it influences your actions, and then your actions influence your results. That's my interpretation of it. I don't know whether you agree with that, but my follow up was going to be, if you had not done the vision board and you had not visualized, what do you think the outcome would have been?
that's an interesting question, and I totally agree with you on the subconscious part of things. Like that's a very direct way of putting it. I love that. If I had not done the vision board, would it have materialized? Probably I would have found a way, even if like, I mean, there's a lot of people who have built their dreams and they didn't have a vision board to do it. I'm just a very, visual person. So for me, it just made sense to have that vision board. But I also had the vision was in my mind as well. Like every day I was just thinking about it and putting the pieces together. And, I think without the vision board, I could have made it happen. But it did make it more clear to me, like it just provided a lot of clarity because there were the many days when the mind becomes very cloudy. We have stress from work and relationships and all kinds of life stuff. So on those days, when I had the vision board there, it really just served as a reminder like, oh, yeah, right. that's what I'm working towards, because there are many days when, my brain just wasn't functioning very well. And it was really hard to, visualize what it is that I wanted. So I really needed to have, the vision board. And it wasn't just the vision board. I had journals and I was writing things down, and, I just had to keep focused on that. So,
I wanted to kind of come to the theme of the episode, which is kind of you've written a ton of books, which are all amazing kind of topics, which I'd like to get into, and perhaps a principle or a lesson from each book, so that if it applies to someone who's interested in that book, they can go and check it out. But one thing that occurred to me before I wanted to ask you about the first one is that most people struggle to write one book, if they write one book at all, and you have written over 30. So there's a productivity question there, which I want to ask you about. How do you do
mm.
it? How do you stay productive in that way?
So I try to keep things simple. Um, and I build things into a system once I figured it out. So I think I started writing again when I really got serious about it, was going back about 15 years. And I had an idea to put together a nonfiction self-help book. I actually was a fiction author, but switched over to nonfiction. And I realized that really it was just like, it was a numbers game. So I just showed up every day, put in the time, and I set a goal for myself to write 2,000 words per day. And my goal was to write, I think it was like, 60,000 words. I didn't really know much about what it, read a lot of books. Hadn't really, well, actually, I had written one way back, maybe in junior high school, but it had been a while. So I just showed up every day, put in the time, most days, not every day. And sure enough, if I blocked in an hour or two a day and I got the word count down, I had a calendar as well. And I don't remember if I gotten this idea from the Jerry Seinfeld, don't break the chain method, but every day that I did my 2,000 words, I put a green check on the calendar. When I didn't do that, I put an X on the calendar. So that way I could just look at the calendar after 1 month and I could just count them all up. And if I had, like, 20 green check marks, I knew exactly how many words I'd written. And then I was like, I knew I was probably that much closer to finishing the rough draft. And it worked because I did finish the first book. In fact, I think in the first couple of years, because I was doing this for quite a few years before I even published anything. And this was before, probably even just a little bit before self-publishing came around. But I realized, like, okay, well, if I can do this for, and then I published the other books, and I was like, okay, well, and I wanted to do more. I just had more ideas. It just went from passion to obsession, maybe, but I just couldn't stop myself from creating more stuff and, putting them out there. But yeah, it really just came down to that system. And to be honest, I follow more or less the same system these days. I have a 2 hour creative time block every day. I don't always use it for writing books, but I'm creating something. But I do that, I still stick with 2,000 words a day. And if on one day, if it's 1,900 words, it still gets an X on the calendar, because at the end of the day, either I check it off as that's the goal, or if I fall short of it, it's not. There's no like, well, I almost made it. I have to like hit that goal or not. So I just, being a little bit hard on myself, I guess. But then again, that was the discipline, right? So
So creating a habit which you follow, and then a bit of positive association with the green mark. I like it, and I want to say congratulations as well, because it's a great example of someone who's producing a lot. People tend to consume a lot, but if you're producing, I think you should be proud of that and also be rewarded for it. So well done. The
thank
first
you.
book, in terms of the lesson, maybe not the first date wise, but the first I'm going to ask you about, empower your fear. What's a lesson
Mhm.
there that you'd share with others?
Wow. Empower Your Fear. Yeah, that's going back a few years. But I started writing that book because I think fear was the one thing that was probably in my way. I think because I was believing more in I was going through a period where I hadn't stopped writing, but I developed this fear of putting the content out there. I think because the first couple of books didn't do very well. And to be honest, I wasn't really much of a marketer. I was just going to create the content and put it out there. But after that, I developed this I don't know, it's this fear around I was stalling on the next book, right? And I realized like the fear is actually something that can empower you, because I looked at it this way. Well, the fear can hold me back from pushing it out there, but there's also the fear of regret. And so empower your fear is about absorbing the fear, realizing that if something feels uncomfortable, that's a good thing because discomfort is where you grow, right? And fear is actually where you grow. So it's one of those things where we think about fear as something we should run away from. And that may be true in the case if you're being chased by a lion. But in this case, it was something that I just embraced as there's always going to be that fear when you're trying to go to the next level. And that's what the book is about, is actually getting to that next level. And my inspiration, actually, a couple of authors I had for that inspiration for writing that book. One of them was Susan Jeffers. Yeah, sorry, Susan Jeffers. And she wrote Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway. And I just loved that. I thought, when I read that book, I was just like, yeah, that's it. Like it's not like I was waiting for the fear to go away before I got back into doing the work. And I realized, well, actually, the fear is here for a reason because the time I was just trying to push my level a little bit further and do something different with the writing. And that was a little bit scary. So I decided to just embrace it and say, okay, I'm gonna take this fear and turn it into a positive thing. And that's really just what the book's about. It's not about getting rid of your fear or trying to like pretend it's not there. It's actually recognizing that it is there. It's there for a reason. And I'm going to, embrace that and just push forward anyway.
Yeah, I've heard from I think Tony recently in relation to negative emotions being a message. So you
Mm,
don't want to get rid of your negative emotions; they serve a purpose. And
mm,
I think you sort of done the same thing there in terms of using it for a purpose and essentially producing something positive.
mm.
So you've gone with empower your thoughts maybe for the next one. What's the lesson there?
Sure. So I don't want to just say the lesson is, think more positively. I think that's a little bit vague. So empower your thoughts is about, we have what, 50,000 thoughts a day? I don't know, a lot. So we can't control
Some
all of
more
them.
than others.
Yeah, 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 for sure. And I realized like when I was getting into meditation, I was trying to, at the time I was meditating with the Buddhist monks here in Japan, and I still do. And they're like, you want to empty your mind and just, and that was really hard for me to do because, just of course we have a lot of thoughts and they were just, like coming in waves, right? And one of the monks had told me, like, you don't have to try to control all your thoughts or even analyze them or overthink them. Just recognize that they're there. He goes, but there's like two or three thoughts that you can create. And that's really what it's about is like, you're going to have a lot of thoughts and that's fine. And a lot of them are going to be negative and, they might be positive and a mix of each. I don't know. But he suggested that just sit down and, instead of emptying your mind, just try to think of one what is one thing that you feel really good about? What's something that a thought that you feel like a lot of gratitude for? Start thinking about the things that make you feel good, not just positive thoughts, but, a person in your life or, an experience that you had. And then he's like, try to, take that positive thought and then, link it to another one and to another one. So the book's really like the book's about empowering it gets into like empowering your mindset. I don't have a book on that topic, but the mindset has a lot to do with your thoughts because, if your thoughts create your emotions, then that means that, if you can control your thoughts, you can control your emotions. And then that leads into, building a second brain, which is kind of maybe a different topic, but that was where the book was leading to. So the topic behind the empower your thoughts is just to recognize that, yeah, you're going to have a lot of thoughts throughout the day. Most of them are going to be maybe unconscious and some of them are, living in your subconscious, but you don't have to be, trying to, observe them all. And I know like some people say, well, you should try to like, and I think this is a good suggestion maybe is like, try to write down all the thoughts that you're having. And that's really, to me, I tried that, just didn't work. There were just too many. Right. So what I do, and what I was doing when I was writing this book, I learned to, and this isn't really a meditation exercise, but it was really just, I found it really hard to sit in silence by myself without anything on, like the TV or anything like that, and just sit there and observe what I was thinking about. And then how was I feeling about those thoughts? And I realized that the longer I did that for, everything kind of started to slow down and I was able to live more in the moment. All right. So that's one of the chapters in the book, actually, is getting into the flow. And I found that when I did that practice, I started to, just have, not just have better thoughts, but everything around me just, it felt more real. Like it was almost like I was living in the moment, actually. And that's really what a big part of the book's about. But again, it wasn't like the simple, if you want to keep the strategy simple, it's just, block off 10 minutes, sit alone by yourself and just enjoy the moment, right? And then, the next day or the next week, you can build it up to 20 minutes and 30 minutes. And again, this is kind of I guess, not really a meditation practice, but a friend of mine had a good name for it. I think she called it like sit alone with yourself or something like that. But that's really what it was, right? And I actually I still do that practice to this day, where sure, I do meditate where I'm just, doing it the traditional Zen mastery way, but I also have those, I'll take like 10, 20, 30 minutes a day where I love to think. And when I do, I start to, after like 5 or 10 minutes, when the mind starts to calm down a bit, start to get a lot of creative ideas. And that's actually leading into a book I'll be working on in the future is Empower Your Creativity. Haven't read it yet, but it's kind of like it's going to be a sequel to Empower Your Thoughts because that was really like a part of the book. I didn't write that chapter in the book at the time, but I observed after practicing this that just became a lot more creative and it just felt great. So anyway, that was probably a longer explanation from that book, but there was a lot that went into it. So
Yeah, totally. And I can definitely see the well-being benefit to slowing down and observing your thoughts. As a side note, you said I don't have a book on that in terms of empower your mindset. When you say that phrase, I don't have a book on that. Does that get the cogs whirring? Do you start think maybe I should do that one?
I've already been asked to create it by a lot of people. So it's in the mix. Yeah. I don't know if it's going to come out this year, but it's on my list. Yeah.
So the next one is empower your success. What's a lesson there?
This has a little bit of an interesting story. I'll try to keep it short. All right. So I have a publisher in Japan, and they've done two books so far. Now, Empower Your Success came about because going back years ago, I was, I guess, discovered by a Japanese publisher. They had found, actually, I think at the time they had found Relaunch Your Life online and they were thinking about publishing it. They're going to buy the rights to it and translate it and publish it. And then they came up with a different idea and they said, we want you to create a book about success and we want it to have 100 short chapters. And I'm like, okay, sure. And there was no guarantee, there was no contract. The agent at the time, he wasn't my agent, but he was kind of like a scout that went out and found authors that they wanted to, bring into the Japanese market. So they actually asked me to create a book like Empower Your Success. So it came about because, first of all, I was asked to do it. But so basically the book is like 60 chapters. The English version is 60 chapters of, short little lessons. There's a whole like from productivity to mindset. So actually there is a section in there on mindset to building your wealth. And there's like 7 other sections. So I can't really say that it's about one thing. But if you take all these lessons together, the great thing about it is each of them are really short lessons. And you can read through one of the, lessons in like a minute and a half and just apply that lesson to it. So there's a lesson in there on how to, overcome your fear and procrastination. The Japanese version of that book actually has 100 chapters because that's what they asked for. So I had to trim it down for the English version because it was quite thick actually. But that book though is I think when I published it, it was already on its way to being published in Japan, so I just published the English version on my own. But I'm going to do an expanded version of it because I'd had a lot of some fan mail over the years, like of ways to make it a better book, and so we're going to do an expanded edition for that. Probably a second edition will launch later this year. So
Do you get into what success means to you?
I do, yeah, and I've been asked that, and I've been asked to teach it in workshops. What is the meaning of success? And I'm sure opinions vary around that. We could get into the different areas of success, like wealth success. And then there's for me, I think relationships, actually, like having really solid relationships. Like if you can have that in your life, have work that you love to do, have people that you love to spend time with. And I think the third thing is just have like a self-love, for yourself. And all of that, when you take all that together, it creates immense gratitude, which is something that I love gratitude. I love to think about it because it really makes you feel good. It'll actually bring tears to your eyes. So for me, if I can have those three things in a day, and of course, there's good food and there's a lot of other things that you can consider to be successful. But um, I think if I were to say, like I think a lot of people, and I'm just talking like for myself because I used to think this way, is like, I'll be successful when, like, success was always something that was going to happen in the future, right? And when I got to that when point, I was like, okay, I would move the goalposts a little further. Okay, well, I got this thing, but I'm not quite there. So I'll be successful when I, make this much money, or when I, like, there was always something else that I had to strive for before I felt successful. And I realized, like, well, isn't that right now? And that was just like one of the greatest revelations for me, is realizing, you don't have to achieve huge goals to be successful or even feel successful. I think it's up to each individual to decide what that is. And if you don't have it yet, well, maybe you need to look around and just see what you do have, because you'd be surprised, you may have already arrived there, and everything else after that is just gravy.
Well, I like your definition, and whenever a definition of success comes up, I always like to mention Earl. I don't know whether you covered any of Earl Nightingale's work, but he's, I would say, one of the things he is known for is the progressive realization of a worthy ideal, which is his definition of success. I always like to use that. But the next one is empower your deep focus.
Mm.
I don't I haven't seen many self-development type books, topics talked about deep focus much. So would you mind sharing a bit on that?
Yeah. So I debated whether calling it focus or deep focus. And the deep focus came around because I really believe in the concept of getting into flow, right? So, the flow method. And I wrote the book, first of all, because focus is something that I really struggle with. I still do to a certain point, probably mostly just distraction. It could be ADHD. We could call it a lot of things, but I wrote the book just out of my struggle to get focused. And I built out a system using that book, where I laid out a framework where, if you want to get focused, first of all, you have to decide that you want to be focused, and the things that are actually holding us back from achieving that. And it's a difficult uh, topic, I think, in a way, because we're all, every day, our focus is really being challenged by a lot of things. And what I realized is that when I was working, I was always distracted by something. Sure, there was, email and tabs open, and there was all this chaos in my environment. And I think a lot of people probably work like that, live like that. But I noticed, though, when the times when I was really focused, and anybody out there who's, we've all had those moments of like flow and focus, that's when I got the most done. I mean, I could take an 8-hour workday where I was just distracted and doing a bunch of stuff and feeling productive. And if I actually had 2 hours of focused time, I think Cal Newport talks about this in Deep Work as well. Great book where he talks about like that. He doesn't say focus, but it's really like the deep work where you get into the flow. And wow, if you can stay there for a sustained amount of time, whether it's, I think 1 hour is a really, like, 45 minutes to 1 hour. But beyond that, like 1 to 3 hours, when I focus on that and I block off that time and I'm able to get into that, it changed my productivity. It's not that I was working harder, or, maybe getting more writing done or something. I just felt like my mind felt like it was on fire. It didn't feel confused, or I was chasing a bunch of rabbits, like shiny object syndrome and everything. I was really in the flow. And I realized I wanted to be there like at least once a day, right? So the book is actually it's a journey for people to help them to build the habit of focus because I think a part of it is the habit, but it's also creating the environment for it as well. Not just your external environment, your internal environment, your mind. You've got to be able to take control of that as well, and it's difficult to do, but it is certainly it's a doable goal, right? If you want to call it a goal, but it was something that I had to work really hard at, and I still do because focus isn't something that just I don't know, just doesn't come to me. I have to make it um, a very specific target. Like every day, I have to decide what it is I'm working on. I may not show up at the exact time to work on it. I mean, that's fine, but I'll decide what it is I'm working on, what my priorities are, and I'll just block off the time and go all in. And there are a lot of days when I still fail at that sometimes, like a lot of tabs are open and I've got to, open loops and projects and stuff like that. But I just keep bringing everything back to, and by the way, just one last thought on that. One thing that the book teaches is breathing. I realized that when I actually focus on my breathing, and again, this comes back to empower your thoughts in a sense. I talked about it a little bit in that book. Breathing was the key because when I was able to breathe, I was able to bring myself back to the moment. And then the focus came within probably 10 or 15 minutes. So,
Yeah, it's not until you mentioned it that I realized that I haven't been there frequently. The only recent instance where I've been there, I think I got like a couple of days work done in half a day or something, feeling super productive. But if it's the
mhm.
case that you can get there, let's say voluntarily, then I think that one might be for me, that book. So
Yeah,
thank you for sharing that.
sure.
Next one, everyone needs a bit of this. So empower your confidence. How does one become confident?
Mm. Well, there are probably a lot of ways you can achieve this depending on what your goal is. But for the first thing I had to look at is what are the things that I'm not confident in that I want to be really good at? And I think when it comes to, let's say, writing books, I was very confident in that because I'd proven that I could do it. So I didn't have issues around that. But I've always had a desire to do public speaking and be in front of people and talking very openly about my ideas. And years ago, I took a business trip to Dubai and I had to give a lecture on stage. It was not related to the books. It was the different business that I was in at the time. And I remember just having to stand in front of a bunch of people and they almost had to pick me up off the floor. I actually lost my breath. Like when I started to speak, it was just terrifying. So you hear about people having stage fright. This was something else. And I realized like I just hated that feeling because I actually enjoy communicating with people, love talking. But when I was in front of a large group, everything just fell apart. And so that was just one of that book actually came from that experience. I think I talked about it in the book. Now, everybody might have their own thing, like something that they want to be confident at. And if you're not good at something and you don't want to do it, you don't have to be confident at that thing. But if it's something that you really desire to have and you're lacking the confidence, well, what I realized is that similar to the fear is like I was always waiting for fear to disappear before I move forward. And I realized it's not going to. And when it comes to the confidence, um, you may hear a lot of people say, I'm going to do that thing when I'm more confident. When I'm feeling confident, then I'm going to do it. But the thing is, the confidence is never, it's not like it arrives and then you move forward. You do have to take action and then the confidence comes as a result of that. So that's really that's the main lesson in the book, actually, is that you can become confident at anything you want, but first of all, make sure it's something that something that you want to build confidence in. And that could be confidence in yourself as well. So if you want to build confidence in yourself, um, just quickly, like one of the strategies that I started doing, probably based on Mel Robbins' book, is in her talks is like stand in front of the mirror and talk to yourself for 5 or 10 minutes. One of the ways that I always like wasn't feeling confident is because I just I didn't want to talk to myself. If that sounds a little bit strange, but like standing in front of the mirror and having that conversation with yourself. But when I started doing it, something started changing inside. I was like, this actually feels pretty good, like having this 5 minute conversation with Scott in front of the mirror. Um, and that built my confidence, because I do a lot of teaching online when I'm very confident with that. But when I first started it, the confidence wasn't there. It was just something that I had to do. And again, just by doing it, I became confident at that thing. Right. And I could say the same thing for, like I'm somewhat fluent in Japanese now. But when I first started learning it, I mean, there wasn't a lot of confidence there, but it just came with putting myself in situations where I had to learn the language in order to, make friends and go to the bank and do all these other things, right? So that confidence just came with, putting yourself out there. I think exposure therapy is a very good thing for, first of all, overcoming the fear of rejection, which I got a couple books on, and then, building your confidence. But here's the thing is like you can have really high confidence and then suddenly you try something that you've never done before and your confidence in that thing, you're starting over again. And that's totally fine because, now you're back in that place of uncertainty and discomfort and you've got to build that muscle again. So I find that is always the case when I'm practicing new skills, new skill set, it's like anything. It's you never feel confident when you first start doing it. And I work with a lot of people who want to write books. I coach authors every day, and I can see it. Very few of them are confident in their writing skills because they haven't. Yeah, sure, they've all written papers in university and things like that, but suddenly when they're writing a book, it becomes a totally different thing. So we just work on building that confidence slowly, and again, it's just all about taking action. So
Just to pick up on one thing you said about speaking to yourself in the mirror for those people who do have, let's say, objections about doing it, what can people gain? What is it that people will get from having a 5 minute conversation with themselves in the mirror?
for me, like, so I don't have any practiced scripts or anything like that, but I'll just stand in front of the mirror for about a minute or two without saying anything, just looking at myself in front of the mirror. Again, is it comfortable? No. uh, but then I'll just start to say, what we're going to do today? We're going to talk to so and so. We're going to do this. We're going to have a great day. And I talk to it almost as if I'm talking to a friend, right? I'm going to go to the gym. I'm going to have a great workout. We're going to be really productive. And I just have this, I mean, I guess it's a one-sided conversation, but to me, like having that conversation with myself, it's like it's setting myself up for having a successful day. And by that, a successful day is just, I'm feeling really good about moving into the day, right? Because if you do this first thing in the morning, when we wake up first thing in the morning, I think we get out of bed, we get into our routine. I do have a morning routine, but um, one of the first things I do actually is I'll do 10 or 15 minutes of stretching and working out just to get things moving. And then I'll have that conversation in front of the mirror with myself. And it's like, okay, well, like it's kind of like a motivational speech to oneself. But the thing is that if you do it enough, you're going to develop, for me anyway, I developed a better relationship with myself. And I think that's something that we all need to continue to work on is the relationship with oneself. Um, because this all relates back to, it helps with everything. It helps with your mindset, first of all. When I'm able to talk to myself. And Mel Robbins said something like, she said, talk to yourself in the mirror and tell yourself that you love yourself. And that's really uncomfortable. I was like, when I first heard that, I was like, I'm not doing that. But I did it. And then I kept doing it. And I was like, okay, this isn't too bad. Maybe if I keep doing it, let's see what happens. And it became easier after a while, but I realized like, well, maybe the reason it's so hard is because I haven't exercised that muscle very much, and maybe that's something I just need to keep working on. So you'll find out a few things about yourself, like what makes you uncomfortable. Maybe those are the things that you should just keep working at. You know, yeah, I don't know. I mean, like nothing's easy. And I mean, if it were easy, I guess everybody would be doing it, and we'd all be living the dreams that we've always wanted to have. But you can have those dreams, but you're going to go through a lot of self doubt and uncertainty to get there.
Yeah, I think encouragement for yourself, which is what I interpret it to be, a bit of encouragement, is sometimes lacking in environment. You don't often get encouragement from other people. And
Mm,
I think a lot of people thrive on it. So it totally makes sense to me. The next one you've mentioned today, and it is empower your gratitude.
mm.
I was a person who would have said to you, although I like the concept, if I don't feel it, like how can I go about feeling it? So, what would you have answered me back when I was a person who struggled with the concept of gratitude?
Yeah. I think gratitude is one of those things where we do take it for granted because, you know, I wrote the book because I realized that I wasn't, and a lot of these books came out of not because I had achieved something and now I wanted to write about it. Uh, I did not overcome fear. So I wrote a book about it. I wrote a book about it because I was struggling with, it was in my way. Gratitude was I was probably in the same situation as you were, where it's like, well, I will feel gratitude after I, again, coming back to the goals, is like once I get this goal, I'm going to feel great about this. I'm not going to have this gratitude until I've achieved something worthy of, and it's just like I just never, not that I never did. I mean, there are things that I felt gratitude for, but what I was missing is that the gratitude that I was chasing was already there, and I just wasn't seeing it. Right. So, actually, I was working with a coach at the time, and he had walked me through this, and he said, "Look," he goes, and I know this is this advice is out there. Like I think maybe Tony Robbins has talked about it, and other people. They're like, make a gratitude list, and that was something that I really did. Making like write down 3 or 4 things every day. Right, like write down um, you know, somebody who you are very grateful for in your life, one thing you're grateful for, and then, it can be one thing that you're going to do today that you're going to feel gratitude for. Maybe it could be helping somebody else. So I started making that list. Again, one of those things where it's like I really had I can write about a lot of things, but I really struggled with that topic um, because I think that there was something inside of myself that was just not quite right, and I have a lot of things to be grateful for. I think anybody does. Sure, we all have different situations, and there are a lot of people that have a lot less than others. So it may be harder, like depending on your situation, it may be really hard to find that gratitude in things. But here's the thing. I started finding gratitude in the simplest things, and this was just a game changer. Again, very simple things that are in front of us every day, but I started going back to the breathing. By the way, I started counting my breaths and going, "Oh, there's another one. There's another one." Right? I'm grateful every day. I have air, and then it was like I'm grateful for every the meal that I'm just about to have, and then it was grateful for my pet, and I realized like I started to visualize a world without these things. Right? So it's kind of like an anti-vision where, having the vision of everything that you want and, the world is working perfectly and I've got everything that I've ever wanted. Well, how about the anti-vision of that where you actually don't have these things, right? What would you do if you didn't have hair for 5 minutes, right? Or, suddenly like, tomorrow or today your pet is gone or whatever it is, because though that day could come, you never know. But right now, like these are the things that I feel grateful for because what would I do without it? So that anti-vision that I was creating just made me feel grateful for the very basics. So it doesn't have to be, I mean, if you want to feel gratitude for wealth and whatever else it is, that's fine. But you don't have to have all of that. Right? Um, and then that got into, kind of comparing myself to other people. And that was kind of like a road that I didn't want to go down. It's because like, well, some people, even though they have a lot, they have a lot less, and there's a lot of people out there with a lot less. I was reading stories about those people and how they found gratitude just in like the basics of life. And it's like, well, if they can find gratitude in something as simple as like walking down the street or being able to walk at all, it's like wow, like what, like why should I be feeling like I'm having a bad day? And this actually started to change my concept around what a bad day is, because sometimes like when we'll call it bad weather, a lot of people say, oh, it's raining, the weather's terrible. It's like, well, that's really, I think that depends. If you're living in an area where you're having brush fires every day, the rain is the best thing that just happened, right? So it's kind of like seeing gratitude in those things. Like we need those things. So I started to just, flip my thinking around, and I'm very aware now when I say things like, "Oh, today's a bad day." It's like, well, what made, how do you frame that up, Because there are some people out there that have really bad days, and it's nothing like the bad day I just had when maybe I was stuck in traffic for an extra 20 minutes. So anyway, very powerful topic. By the way, when I wrote that book, quick, just off note, but the Japanese publisher, they actually, the book Empower Your Success, that actually wasn't the first book that they published. They held off on that for a few years, and they wanted the gratitude book, so they actually published that book first, and it really took off in Japan. So I think that a lot of people resonated with it, and when it did, they decided to publish the other book. So yeah.
Why is it that it did well given the topic and the location? Why do you think that that was the case?
Well, yeah, so they put up a YouTube channel. They created a YouTube channel for it, and like this like 40-minute video, and they just had it went from like a few comments to a few dozen to hundreds to like there's probably a couple thousand on there now. And I was reading through them, and a lot of people were just resonating with it because they were starting to recognize the things that, like, a lot of people were like, they had the complaining addiction or the complaining habit, right? So that's another thing too, is I very rarely will complain about anything these days. And I'm not saying I don't have things to complain about, but it's like, why complain about it if it's either you can fix it or you can't. And if you can't fix it, don't complain about it. Just, like try to find the good in it. Right. So a lot of people were talking about that where, the book helped them to break uh, their addiction to complaining, which I think was a big win for a lot of people. Right. So people had different reasons why they liked the books. Some people just said like it just changed their perception of how they viewed the world. So but yeah, anyway, I think I just sold the rights to the book to a Chinese publisher as well and the Korean publisher. So it's kind of gaining a little bit of traction. So it's probably the one book in the series where it'll appear in quite a few languages, but we'll see. I mean, I'm curious to see how people resonate with it, and if I've been asked to write a follow up to that book. I'm not sure what that would be. I think one is enough, but yeah.
Well, to follow up on what you said about negative visualization, I have heard that example in relation to sort of arguing with a spouse. You
Mm,
get you visualize, let's say, a phone call or an example where something terrible has happened, and you actually realize that instead of being ungrateful for what you have, you become very grateful that that person is in your life, even after a bickering argument or something. So I can totally see why that would be beneficial. Thank you for sharing it. The next
yeah.
one is actually something that you have talked about in relation to writing your
Mhm.
books each day. Empower your best habits. What's a other than what we've spoken about? What's a good lesson from there?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'd like to think that the book has some originality and some uniqueness. I think James Clear did a terrific job with Atomic Habits, so there's a lot to learn from there. But I wanted to put this book out because the what I realized is we'll call them bad habits. All right. So I think to frame what a bad habit is anything that is pulling you away from your goals, right? And I'll just use goals as something you're striving for. You do need a routine, right? And I think building the routine was something that we all have little habits every day that whether it's brushing your teeth or, whether it may be, but I always struggle with building a habit because and this is actually linking back to the focus. I got really distracted by, I don't know, life in general, just doing too much, not really committing to the habit of showing up every day for myself, right? Now that sounds contradictory to, I would show up for, like say my writing strategies, I would show up for that. And there were certain habits that I did really well with. But one of the habits that I wanted to kick was my probably my sugar habit, eating a lot of sugar, right? That was a habit of just like every night I would, before going to bed, I'd probably have like an ice cream, a chocolate bar, and I would down it with coffee. And there's no wonder that I wasn't sleeping very well, right? So I started to, the book didn't come about because I wanted to create just, great habits for productivity. It's because I had these habits that were stealing my health and probably impacting, like negatively impacting my mindset, right? So when I started to gradually change some of these habits, like just slowly, I started to dissolve them. Something happened inside my, like neurologically speaking, I just built a better mindset for myself, right? And it was because of not the good habits that yes, I was creating better habits, but I was actually getting rid of the bad habits. And for that to happen, I had to make a list of what they were. I had to recognize what they were. And more importantly, I had to realize, like, what are the triggers? Why was I like indulging in sugar every night? And it took me about I think 6 months to a year to finally, like, I haven't quit sugar like 100%. I still enjoy the occasional ice cream and chocolate, but I was able to get rid of those. Again, just call them bad habits because, again, a bad habit is anything that was just like making me a lesser version of myself that I wanted to be. So the book came around because I had developed like a system for taking those those strategies, building a better habit for it, and not going back into those negative habits and starting, like, because once I went back and if I slipped back into the negative habits, I just started the whole routine again. If I went back and started eating a bunch of sugar again, then it was kind of like an addict who might slip back into their addiction. I found that when I slipped back into those habits, I was just back in the same space that I was. So
Well, as you have probably gathered, we are not going to be able to get a lesson from each book because you've written so many. So my attempt was going to be a lesson from each, but we don't have enough time. So I would like to give you a opportunity to pick one, perhaps either a favorite book or
mm,
one
mm,
that you'd like to highlight, and then perhaps give us a lesson of what people can expect to get from that book.
sure. I think I will go with do the hard things first. All right. So just a little bit of I won't go into this in too much detail, but do the hard things first came about because of my chronic procrastination, which was a big obstacle for me to overcome. I still battle with it sometimes. And just to give you an example, like we all procrastinate on something, we put things off. That's just human nature. But chronic procrastination went a lot deeper. I would put things off that later on would have like some very negative, like a very negative impact with, like not paying a credit card bill or doing something that was detrimental to what I wanted to achieve. So I came up with the concept of, if I'm going to stop this behavior, I need to first of all be aware of what are the things that I'm putting off. It wasn't so much the why. I mean, obviously, like I didn't want to do hard things because they were scary. And I'll give you an example. Okay, probably filling out application forms. I had application forms that had to be filled out to get things done, whether it was getting a bank loan, applying for passports, whatever it may be. I would just, if someone gave me an application form and said, fill this out by tomorrow, it would still be sitting in my drawer a month later. And that became a big problem, right? Now, there are other things as well, but I had to break it down into very small steps. And so I created a framework for breaking the procrastination habit by just taking small steps towards something. So I'll just use the application form as an example. One day I would write my name on the form and that'd be it. The next day I'd fill out my address. And I know this sounds very basic, but this is actually a form that would take 20 minutes to fill out, maybe 15 minutes. I spent hours and hours of wasted energy putting it off and putting it off. And what happens when you procrastinate is that you start to distrust yourself. You just don't trust yourself to do these things because you're in such a habit of, putting it off. And I realized like I've been doing that since I was probably in school. I think, whenever I got my homework assignments, I threw my bag in the corner and I wouldn't pick it up until Monday morning. Homework not done, and that just carried throughout my life. So, and I talked to a lot of other people who had battled with a similar condition. So the strategy with this book is that what I would recommend is that if you are struggling with procrastination, and again, we all have different levels of this. um, I just made a list of all the things that I was putting off, and it just can be anything. It can be clutter in your room. Um, can be the laundry that you haven't put out for a week, whatever it is. Make a list of these things. I had like 150 things on the list, and I just made a list of everything. I went around the house, made a list of things. I had my desktop was a mess, like all kinds of things. And then I would just pick one thing on that list every day that I would do. And some of them were a lot easier than others, and others were really difficult. And you just need to start to get the small wins, right? Because I had this big list, and then, it started off small. Every day I would do one thing, cross it off, cross it off. And the list gradually got shorter. I was adding a few things to it as well as I found other things, but I would just do one hard thing for like 10 or 15 minutes. Some things took 30 minutes. But first of all, getting back to the confidence, well, every time when I started to do these things, first of all, I was getting things done that I've been putting off for years. It built my confidence. It built better habits because now instead of the habit of saying, I'm going to do it tomorrow, I'll do it next week, I was now into the habit of saying, I'm going to do it right now and I'm going to block off 5 minutes for it. Because what was happening is one of the reasons that we procrastinate is because we're always going to do it later. And if it's something that I have the 2 minute rule, if I can do something in 2 minutes or less, I'm just going to do it right now, get that win out of the way. Right. So the book's really like, I think it's simple in its in the structure. It is a couple hundred pages, but probably could have been a little bit shorter, but the concepts are solid because it really just the first part of the book sets people up for like the foundations of procrastination and why we need to break this habit or this behavior. But the other part of the book is really just the framework, and you don't have to follow everything from A to Z. The strategies are laid out so that you can go with like the 5 minute principle and other strategies that I have that are just designed to get you to take action. So I know I talk a lot about taking action, but like with a lot of the things that we do, the reason that we don't progress is because we're stuck. And a lot of the times we're stuck because we don't have clarity on what the next step is. So, you don't have to figure out the whole thing. You just need to know what's the next step. What's that small like step that I can take right now just to move forward a little bit, get a little bit of confidence and take the next one. So,
I love that. Mainly because it highlights maybe the things that you're procrastinating on and you're not even really consciously aware that you are. So
mm,
the list is I love that, and sort of chunking it down. I think I'm going to implement that. So I appreciate that. Before we close, I just wanted to ask you one thing, which is you've been in immersing yourself in self-development. How do you think it has impacted your life that you've been almost constantly focusing on,
mm,
shall we say, improving yourself?
mm. It's changed everything. So let me just clarify what that means. Going back, let's just go back, way back, probably maybe 30 years or so. Um, I think one of the first, I got into self-help personal development because I had to. I was going through a period in my life where I had a lot of bad habits that I had to stop doing. I wasn't improving. I was probably declining quickly. And I realized that if I didn't get help, I was going to be in like probably pretty bad conditions. So I had someone recommend a book to me. It wasn't Tony Robbins' book, the first one. It was another little book by Hal Urban. I think it's like 20 Things to Do with Your Life or something like that. Just great little book. And it's one of the first self-help books that I read. And what I found after I went through it, I started practicing some of the little strategies that he had, and it's like they were working. Like I started to do things differently. And the thing is that when it comes to behavior, it's always about like behavior change. It's always about doing things differently than you were doing before, obviously. But there's one thing to read, it's one thing to read about it, you know, but you have to take action. You have to execute the action, right? So when I started taking action on these things, it became like my new addiction, right? And I was like, oh, this is great. Like, what else is out there? And I found another book and another book and another book. And I wasn't, I was journaling a lot and making a lot of notes. And every time I read these books, I always had like a yellow highlighter and I was highlighting everything because I wanted to go back later and read through it. I still have a lot of those books, but it became like I said, it became like an addiction or an obsession. And this actually did lead into, the vision map and creating something greater for my life because where my life was going prior to that just wasn't going in a very good direction, right? So self-help just changed everything. I mean, we call it self. I don't actually, to be honest, I don't like to use the term self-help because first of all, I don't think anybody is really going to, nobody makes it on your own, right? I had a lot of help, right? And it wasn't all because of me. I had help from books, from mentors, from coaches. Asking for help, one of the hardest things to do, but that was the one thing that probably, saved me back when I needed to be saved. And what I loved about, like, I just felt like when I got back into writing and I was, writing a lot of fiction, it was like, well, do I go with the fiction or do I go with the personal development? And with the personal development, I just felt like, well, it was a bit of imposter syndrome because, hey, I'm not as great as like, Brian Tracy or Jim Rohn or, Mel Robbins or, it's like, but should that hold me back? Right. And I just decided, well, I've read enough material. I don't have a degree in psychology, but, the material is all out there. I'm just going to write a book based on my own experiences. And that's really where it began. But it started something when I just say like when I put the first book out there, um, I wasn't expecting anybody to really read it. In fact, I didn't even tell anyone about it. And then when I started to get some emails from people or some feedback, they actually liked the material. And I thought, maybe there's something to this. So I just kept going with it. But the thing is, though, is like, it wasn't sure, I wanted to help a lot of other people. But what I found is that by writing these books, it's making me a greater human being. And if I can do that for myself, it's actually empowering me to help more people, right? And that's really what it's about. That's why I love to this day just doing more writing, like and going deeper with the writing. Like I'm, always studying new stuff, like um, neuroscience, and I'm getting into other fields that I've never really thought about going into. But it's like, well, that's got to be the next direction because people are asking me questions about it. It's like, well, I don't really have the answer to that. So maybe I need to go do some more research, So that's the great thing about it is like, you never hit, I mean, you might hit a ceiling, but that's only because, I continue to do the same things again and again. So I love the challenge of just seeing, what's the next level, how far can I go with this? And how many more people can I impact?
All right. Well, I think you're a big inspiration from the productivity and the producing loads of stuff and the topics that you cover. They're inspirational. So well done. For people who do want to buy a book or maybe all the books, where do they go?
Yes, well, of course, everything is on Amazon, I'm sure. You can just go there and plug in Scott Allan Books or author. You can visit scottallanpublishing.com or scottallanbooks.com. We have the Shopify store set up for direct sales as well. And we're finally building the courses this year. So the course platform will be launching in about 3 months.
Cool. Sounds good.
All
Scott,
right.
thank you for being a great guest today.
I had a great time. Thank you very much for having me on the show.